With us on the panel, Jim Hanson, U.S. Army Special Forces veteran, chief editor of the Middle East Forum; Joel Rubin, former Deputy Assistant Secretary of State under President Obama; Mick Mulvaney, former White House Chief of Staff; Senator Markwayne Mullin as well, of the great state of Oklahoma. In the break, we were talking, gents, about why we have not yet seen the Iranian response. My supposition here is because the Israelis took out much of the Iranian command structure, number one, their communications as well. Part of this is to scare the Iranians that we know, in terms of the Israelis, where everybody is sleeping. So you get the Iranians arguing with each other, and that paralyzes, Senator Mullin, their military.
It does, but it also, the Iranians can't get out there and lose this fight. What are they going to launch? Israel's controlling the airspace right now. They've obviously showed they can break through their air defense. And they're not worried about the ballistic missiles. We've heard Ted Cruz go out there a while ago, and he's rightfully so. They have a tremendous amount of arsenal of ballistic missiles, but at the same time, we have David's Sling, we have the Iron Dome, and we have the aerial missile defense that is setting in Israel, and ballistic missiles are the easiest ones for us to track. They're much easier to track than drones. They've also shot a tremendous amount of weaponry over the last 6 months that Israel and the others that control the airspace around Israel that the Iranians have to come through has decimated.
So here's my question, Markwayne. Is it the Iranians are not responding right now? Is that because they can't or they choose not to?
I think they choose not to. They can't take a defeat. They would love to, but where are they going to go up in the air? And how could they, right? As I said, Israel's controlling the airspace. If they launch something right now and they get whipped.
I just wonder if they don't have the ability to, because part of me says,
I think
look,
a part of it.
The command and control is maybe so shot that they don't have the ability to actually do it. But even if they did, I'm sitting there thinking, why not go ahead and use these things before the Israelis destroy them?
Well, we know there's multiple waves, right? So there was the first wave that took out the air defenses. We also understand that there was some Israeli special operations and intelligence assets doing sabotage inside Iran on this night. Jim, I see you nodding along and smiling.
Well, my question is, we said we weren't part of the strike. Are we going to be part of the defense when Iran does launch? Because we have been previously. When the exchange happened last year, when Iran launched all of the drones and missiles and everything that they had, we shot a lot of those down. All right, there were U.S. fighter planes shooting them down. Our air defense stuff took them out. I'm assuming that we would not deny Israel that protection if Iran retaliates. It would surprise me if we don't, but that's going to be a big question when this actually does come, and it's going to come.
So I would answer that as I believe we will, because the amount of troops they got to fly over to get from Iran to Israel.
Of America.
Yes. We have assets between those two locations, and we also have friends in those locations. I believe we will be forced to, because we control a lot of the airspace. We control a lot of the airspace, too, between those two. Yep. And if we control the airspace, then we have to defend that airspace.
So just now from the Iran's military spokesman, somehow they were able to get this out overnight. Israel's attacks were aided by the U.S. They will pay a heavy price and should expect a severe response from Iran's armed forces. Joel, I'm going to turn this around. Yeah. Because there is so much of, and now a lot of this from the right even, oh, this is going to be World War III, this is going to be World War III. The last time the Iranians were really punched in the nose was by President Trump under his first term when he took out Qasem Soleimani. Now, that was one general, that was one time. But the Iranians took it, because they realized that if they struck U.S. assets and got into a war with the United States, they would lose their regime in their country. At some point, might the Iranians be forced, if this attack by Israel is as devastating and well-planned and continued as it seems to be, that they can't respond because they realize that annihilation is their only option?
You know, Leland, look, there are, I think, two very key variables to consider in this question. First of all is the changed strategic environment, the actual on-the-ground military capacity that Iran has. It's been eviscerated over the past year. Hezbollah in Lebanon, eviscerated. That was their hedge against this kind of strike that we saw tonight. That's gone. Clearly, Hamas decimated inside of Gaza. The Houthis are an irritant, but they're not a direct, massive threat. And, of course, Assad falling in Syria. So Iran doesn't have many cards to play. But I do think it's very important. If President Trump wants to get ahead of this and wants to ensure that American assets are not struck, he needs to get out and put that message down firmly that there will be major retaliation. Because if he does not, and if American troops are struck, he will then be on retreat. And this is a major,
we've heard this from.
Do you really need to send that message again? I mean, look, it doesn't hurt to do it.
I don't think he sent it tonight. I think that Secretary Rubio said we have nothing to do with this.
I think
but the end of that statement says, and if they go after the Americans, it's trouble.
It's very clear what we will do.
Yeah.
Well,
so
if you're the Iranians and you take that into consideration, just putting all this together, they have very little operating room, and I think that's the bottom line.
Two things that have just happened right now. D.C. police have now cordoned off a huge area around the Israeli embassy. Now, whether that is because they fear that the Iranians have either sleeper agents or the ability to respond in the United States says a lot. Number two, that the largest medical center in Israel, in Tel Aviv, has opened its emergency underground hospital and transferred their patients down. The Israelis have their normal hospitals above ground, and then when they build a hospital down deep underground, parking garages that they can turn into makeshift hospitals in the event of war. We saw that after October 7th. We're seeing that again now. Jim, I don't think we can stress in real terms, but I keep thinking sort of the extraordinary nature of the Israelis that don't have long-range bombing capabilities. It's not like the United States that have B-2s and B-52s and B-1s and everything else. They've got F-16s, F-15s, and F-35s flying at the longest range they have in multiple waves, taking out and taking apart the Iranian military.
And the nice thing about that...
And what we're watching is extraordinary. There will be books written.
It's a truly impressive thing. I mean, they've done some of the greatest long-range raids in history. Look at Entebbe, the greatest commando raid anyone's done ever. And what they did this time, they may not have hit everything, they may not have taken everything out, but they damaged it enough that they can follow on and take out the rest of it. And one thing to think about, Joel brought up a good point. The Iranian military is not an expeditionary force.
That's right.
They can't roll tanks on anybody.
Right.
If they tried to roll tanks, they wouldn't make it to their own border.
No.
Yeah.
All right, so nobody's in danger of a war with Iran. Asymmetric activity like terrorism, like missile strikes, like all of the things they can do, blowing up ships in the straits, that's going to happen to whatever extent they can. And everyone knows that. Those are known things that we're all prepared for. But there's not going to be a war in Iran, regardless of the howling from a lot of people who are saying that's the result of this.
Exactly.
Just one update here. Israeli Air Force has also struck the Iraq heavy Iraq heavy water production plant.
Right.
So the waves are continuing.
Really?
Yeah.
I mean, the plutonium facility, so they're really going all in, and that was the...
Well, Prime Minister Netanyahu has said this is going to go on for days. At what point...
Sweep.
I understand this point that, and you've made it over and over, take you not only at your word, but also you are as close to the administration as anyone gets in Congress and in the Senate, that the United States was not involved. Fine. At what point will the United States, actually I shouldn't say what point, the United States will have to start resupplying Israel pretty quickly here with weapons. That is the bunker busters, that is missile defenses, that is aircraft parts, on and on and on. Then the United States does kind of become involved, doesn't it?
Well, yes, if they want to put it that way, but at the same time, Israel's always been our ally. We've always been able to sell arms to them, and we will continue to do so. We will continue to restock them as long as it's really in both of our interests, and which it is right now. It's in our interest. But I think a good point that was just made is Iranians, they don't have the capability to have an all-out war. When was the last time they actually fought?
Iraq.
Right. And how well did that go?
Not well.
Not good.
I want to give, just from the military's perspective, Lieutenant General U.S. Air Force retired, Glenn Ignacio, retired Air Force Special Operations Commander as well. General, start with you. How surprised are you at the Israelis' ability to project force, not once, but multiple times, and what it appears so far is that they have gained air superiority over a country 1,000 miles away?
Well, Leland, I'm not surprised at all. I've seen the Israeli Air Force in action, and I go back to, and we've been talking about this tonight, go back to the attack, the counterattack that Israel conducted on October 26th. They did that in 3 waves, and we've heard tonight there's 1 wave, perhaps more to come. But those 3 waves, I think, should have really earmarked what the Israelis are capable of doing and what their playbook would be moving forward from October 26th all the way here until June of 2025. First, go after Iranian air defenses, which they did extraordinarily effectively. Then go after their command and control. Take their eyes away from their air defenses as well as the leadership. And then third, then they went after their ballistic missile capabilities. My sources tell me degraded Iran's ballistic missiles back October 26th, almost up to 50%. So this is really out of the Israeli playbook. They've really leaned on their Air Force significantly. I think they'll continue to do so. Frankly, I'm not surprised by this or the capability.
Well, not only lean on their Air Force, but also lean on their intelligence assets. I mean, the idea of being able to target where these generals were sleeping and where these nuclear scientists were sleeping is extraordinary.
And let's not forget also their special forces, Leland, as well, certainly.
Yeah. This now, when we don't know yet about whether there was SF components flown into Iran, an Israeli official telling the Jerusalem Post, quote, "We presented the American administration with evidence of Iran's breakthrough towards a nuclear bomb." This is the point that Iran had reached the point that they could make a nuclear bomb, and the Israelis believed that they were going to. There was full and complete coordination with the Americans. This is the Jerusalem Post quoting an Israeli official. Glenn, to you, the Israelis don't put planes in the air over hostile territory without a way to rescue pilots. And I think about the amount of risk now that the Israeli Air Force was willing to go through. Take us through what their plans would have to be able to rescue folks.
I think that's one of the things about some of these special forces or the intelligence components that they have on the ground. As we know, they are fantastic in around. Those forces that they have would be really one of the extraction devices if anything was to happen where somebody had to eject to get that down. At the same time, how much are they pre-positioned? We don't know, but that would be one of the big things. But you have to also remember, as the general was referring, the strikes that they did before, that gave us a big eye-opening experience. When they did that, all their radar, all their AAA, all their assets lit up to look at the Israelis months ago. That tells the Israelis where all these sites are. So it's basically highlighting all their aircraft defense, missile defense systems. So that was a great thing for the Israelis to plan and go into this. And so that's one of the reasons why it also decreases the danger for the Israeli fighter pilots. The F-35s went in really unchallenged, and I'm sure that's what they used tonight with a lot of the intelligence.
Yeah, needed F-15s as well for the bunker busters to get it into the nuclear facilities. Senator, wanted to get your response. We presented the American administration with evidence of Iran's breakthrough towards a nuclear bomb. There was full and complete coordination with the American. Are we going to start parsing the words between coordination, approval,
and
on and
knowledge?
on?
Knowledge and coordination is they're in completely different areas. That's like an orange and an apple. They're
both fruit.
Yeah, they're both fruit, but they don't taste the same. And so my point is informing and coordination is 2 different things that may just simply be lost in translation. But I will go back and say this: we won't sit idle if Iranians are going to try to punch us in the face over Israel. But at the same time, I believe that we will be standing with Israel if Iranians are going to try to escalate this even farther. But the point that was made by a proxy war or a covert war is very real. And I would say that if Israel, which, as we can all agree on this panel, is the absolute best at intelligence gathering in that region, if they are taking this so serious back home, then they probably know a lot more about the capabilities than any of us sitting on this panel does.
Joel?
Yeah, look, I'm going to agree with that. And I think that the trigger perhaps this week from the public messaging perspective was the IAEA censuring Iran for its illicit nuclear behavior. First time in 20 years. Deeply
They're a little late to the party.
Deeply troubling. No, but what that does, that gives the Europeans cover and concern, that gives the public imprimatur from a third party that their behavior on the nuclear file has gone too far. And that
gives the Arab world. It also gives the Saudis, the Qataris, the Emiratis.
Have we seen any statements from any of the other Arab nations?
We have not. And look, Mick brought up the point from the very beginning whether or not they use Saudi airspace, which would have required.
They can get to Iran without going over Saudi, but it's really hard to.
Well, it's a lot longer. General Newton, to you, a senior IDF official talking to Channel 14, which is one of the big news channels in Israel. We brought an unprecedented achievement, a significant blow to the top of the Iranian army and the Revolutionary Guards. In addition to nuclear scientists, the executors are. I think that's lost in translation from the Hebrew. We have a long and extensive offensive plan for the days ahead. We have complex days ahead. The Iranians will respond. If the public is disciplined, there will be few casualties. We are at war. Just from a military standpoint, dissect those sentences and how it's different than when the Israelis struck Iran a year ago.
Well, first and foremost, I think it's setting obviously the conditions for a longer engagement, days, perhaps even weeks, for Israel to continue to apply pressure, if not continue to attack Iran, number one. Secondly, I think it's also making sure that the Israeli people know that the Israeli government has got this. They really understand the conditions that they're moving forward with, that there may be some extreme asks of the Israeli people, but nonetheless, they're going to prevail. The third part of this is I believe that Israel has demonstrated with its capability, and certainly with its Air Force, with its intelligence, and even special operations, that it will prevail in this conflict. But Israel's got to be ready. The Israeli people have to be ready for a counterattack from Iran. And so I think it's all in that crucible, Leland, that they're really trying to not only set the expectations, but manage the expectations, especially in the coming hours and the coming days.
Yeah, and as you point out, this will be a sustained campaign. All right, 10:55 right now here in Washington, D.C. President Trump will be, at least publicly, we are told, in the Situation Room tomorrow morning, 11 a.m. One would imagine that he is getting briefings throughout the night here in terms of what has happened.
Oh, he's in the Situation Room right now.
That's Mick Mulvaney, former White House chief of staff. Sun's coming up in Tel Aviv, which will be probably one of the world's quietest cities tomorrow, as much of Israel will be in their bomb shelters awaiting this Iranian response. 700,000 Americans live in Israel, 50,000 American troops in the bullseye of a promised Iranian counterattack from Israel's massive bombing campaign that began overnight and will continue throughout the days. The Israelis say we are at war now with Iran. Significant change in the Middle East that we have not seen in decades. Back at the top of the hour with how the United States financial markets are responding. Israel's massive surprise attack on Iran's nuclear facilities and the coming Iranian response. Live pictures of Tel Aviv, where, as you can see, it is now 6 a.m., and Tel Aviv will be one of the world's quietest cities, as much of the Israeli population, including 700,000 Americans, are going to be in their bomb shelters. The Iranians have promised attacks not only on Israel, but on American bases, 50,000 American service members throughout the Middle East. Overnight, Israel launched a massive surprise attack on Iran's nuclear program. They said Iran was within days of developing a nuclear bomb, and with that proceeded to take out much of Iran's military command structure, including the head of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. Israel then took out a number of Iran's top nuclear scientists and began bombings onto Iran's nuclear facilities, including Natanz, the main place for uranium enrichment, and then also one of their heavy water reactors. This was the moment of inflection people have been waiting for in the Middle East for about 20 years, and now it has happened. The IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, saying they are at war, and this will be a multi-day campaign against Iran. They start by taking out Iran's air defenses, their command and control, and what was a surprise attack. And now we're following up with waves and waves of bombing, both by fighter jets. The Israelis don't have long-range bombers, and then also with drones. The Israelis are also prepared for this massive Iranian counterattack. The Iranians have thousands of ballistic missiles, although they have not launched any of them right now. Incredible panel with us as well. Joel Rubin, formerly at the State Department under the Obama administration. Senator Markwayne Mullin with us. Jim Hanson is with us. Also remotely, Lieutenant General Richard Newton of the United States Air Force, retired, and Glenn Ignacio, former Air Force Special Operations Commander. Glenn, I'm going to start this in reverse with where this all began, which is the unbelievable intelligence operation by the Israelis of penetrating into Iran and knowing where the Iranian generals were sleeping, literally, to take them out. And I think that probably plays into a lack of response by the Iranians, that so much of their command and control has been destroyed.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if we look at it, even in the prior months that they were taking individuals out within Iran itself, the Mossad and all of the organizations that Israel has is one of the best. We keep on repeating that. But to be able to identify both where the individuals are, because they take out the individuals, it impacts them today and for tomorrow, but also all the command and control sectors, the radar, power plants, anything that's going to take those systems down. Having that understanding, that presence on the ground, and be able to highlight those and have the Israeli defense or the Air Force take them out is pristine. And that's something that is completely dominated by the IDF and has absolutely put Iran back on their heels. And it will continue with that type of intelligence from the ground. That is absolutely priceless.
Senator Mullin's nodding along. I think there's a lot of Americans tonight who are watching and thinking about not only 700,000 Americans in Israel, of whom a number of Joel Rubin's relatives, but also 50,000 American troops. You put out a tweet earlier saying that this is not our war, that the United States was not involved, but that we would respond if Americans are targeted.
Absolutely, 100% without question. And we have to understand, too, we have a lot of Americans that are there that don't live, but they're there it's summer. And a lot of Americans go to Israel right now for vacation. If the airspace is closed, we've got to figure out how we're going to get these individuals out. And I can assure you that Marco Rubio and the embassy there they've got to start having plans. Fortunately, when the war in Gaza started, we did have some type of plans put in. We can simply activate those again because we don't always have to take them out by air. We can take them out by sea too. But this has to change. And during that evacuation, I promise you we'll be on standby. And if we feel threatened at all, we will be proactive, not reactive.
You know, it's amazing you say that. It takes me back to when I lived in Israel. And this goes back to the 50s, 60s, and 70s, that the American embassy in Tel Aviv used to exist right on the coast. It had a sea view. And the thought was it was because if there ever needed to be an evacuation, you could bring marine landing craft right up to the U.S. embassy. That's how dangerous and volatile and vulnerable Israel was thought to be. Obviously, a lot has changed since the 1950s and 60s when the threat of Israel being overrun was real and existed. Lieutenant General Newton, to you, the Israelis say this is going to be a sustained bombing campaign. What is the next set of targets? We go through the radars, command and control, high-value nuclear targets. What continues on in the coming days?
I think what continues on, Leland, is we'll continue to go back and make sure, based on reports from the battlefield, from we've got on intelligence, to make sure we've taken out those air defense capabilities thoroughly, as well as command and control. But I think next on the docket is going to be their ballistic missile capabilities. Not only the ballistic missile operational capabilities in the field, but to go after their ballistic missile development capabilities as well. And of course, I anticipate them to go back to the nuclear weapons sites, not only in Natanz, but elsewhere, to really thoroughly, shut down Iran, not only from its nuclear weapons capabilities. We've been talking about this all night, but really the means to deliver those nuclear weapons, those ballistic missiles, and perhaps their drone production as well, I think is really now top of their list.
Jim, you study Iran and the Iranian command and control structure. How significant is it from their military standpoint that the Israelis were so deeply penetrated into Iran's military? And I just think about now, as they're trying to convene their war council, there's got to be members of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard and of their top brass looking at each other and saying, who sold us out to the Israelis?
Yeah. Who's got a beeper? Who's handing it to somebody else, right? It's Operation Grim Beeper.
No one's answering a phone or doing with an alarm clock right now.
And where's the supreme leader?
Yeah.
You know they went after him. Did they get him? That'd be nice. That'd be a bonus. All of those people are completely on their heels, and the Israelis
and on the run,
completely baffled. Yeah, and they're hiding. Now, I think the next step, we're trying to figure out what they're going to do next. I think the question becomes, what is the next escalation point? Are they going to go and shut down the ports? Are they going to go and try and isolate Iran? Or are they going to say, we took out your nuke sites and wait a minute and see what happens in the Iranian civil society? What are the
potential of another Iranian revolution?
What color would this one be? I don't care. But any color would be better than the Islamic Republic and the Ayatollahs. Maybe this is a time, and, God willing, creek don't rise. I would be fine with that.
And keep in mind, the nuclear sites are not in one area. They have them spread out between five
buried
separate cities.
And hidden and everything else.
Yeah, well, they do, but we also know of 5 different areas. I mean, they have the uranium enrichment plant. They have the deep underground enrichment. They have the heavy water reactor. They have the conversion facility, and they have the weapons facilities. They're all in separate towns across Iran. And so there's plenty of targets that they have to go after, and you're not going to do that in 1, 2, or 3 ways.
The Israelis said now, unofficially, but I think over the coming days we will get some official statements, that the reason they did this is that the Iranians were within days of being able to build a nuclear weapon. They had intelligence that the Iranians were much farther along than President Trump and others sort of had let on, that information was shared with the Americans. To what level there was coordination, was there advanced knowledge, was there an approval, we don't know. But I think Mick Mulvaney asked a really important question. Do the Israelis put boots on the ground, not just a couple of Mossad assets, but actual Israeli boots on the ground to start destroying these sites internally?
Well, Leland, first of all, this was the window of opportunity from an Israeli perspective. There was no better window than now, and it was closing, and they were looking at that, and perhaps Iran could rebuild its defensive posture to protect its sites, and they saw that still not happening. But to get on the ground, I was just reading what the Israeli Chief of General Staff just said. He is trying to lay out to the Israeli people right now that there will be casualties, that we will be seeing difficult days ahead. So I bet you can envision a situation where, yes, there would be troops on the ground sent by Israel into Iran. It could be very dangerous. It would be to potentially hit some of the areas where if they're coming, if the missile capacity continues and they can't get it by air, you could see that. But Israel is also war weary, and this is very important to talk about. They've spent 18-plus months now in a very difficult war in Gaza. The public is uncomfortable with how much
war with Gaza,
and
a war with Hezbollah.
But the reserve call-ups, they've been extensive. And so I wonder how much rope the military has in Israel. I wonder how much the Israeli public will allow.
There's a different definition of boots on the ground, I guess, in this point. I don't see there's any scenario where Israelis could actually deploy troops, actual troops, where an invasion would kind of see into Iran. If you're talking about a covert operation.
Covert special operations.
Yes, they already have people there for that, because otherwise it wouldn't be targeting. That's a total different perspective. So visually speaking, I don't think, Jim, you can help me here. I don't think there's a way that they could actually deploy troops into Iran unless we were with them.
Yeah, no, it's too far away.
Right.
I mean, look at what happened when we tried to rescue the hostages. That was too many steps involved to get that far and project force that far. But there's plenty of stuff to blow up. And remember, we don't have to actually see those underground facilities destroyed as long as you cover and blow up the entrances, and then you've got satellite coverage on it. Say, oh, they're going back and digging that one out.
That's right.
Boom. Blow it up again. If they can't resupply it, those people will run out of supplies underneath the ground there and eventually have a problem breathing. So,
but
I don't think it has to be
very
destroyed
interesting,
right now.
difficult, tricky questions here, right? When Israel struck into Syria and blew up the facility there, the nascent nuclear facility there, they did that. They may have verified it on the ground, but they didn't show the evidence to the world. When they hit Iraq and Iraq in the early 80s, it was above ground. They may very well need to have assets on the ground that can verify that what they're hitting is actually hit properly. And so I wouldn't take that off the table. I agree with you, though, Sarah. We're not talking about like rolling in tanks, but certainly I don't think they would be taking anything off the table now if they want to ensure that these strikes are effective, because they're not going to have unlimited time on this. They need to make sure that they're effective.
Just picking up on what Jim said, Reuters now quoting Iranian sources, the Supreme Leader Khamenei is alive.
Of course he is.
He's probably somewhere it's hard to get a hold of him. But and the world would be a better place without him still breathing the same air, I think is worthwhile pointing out. But we think about the timing here. And I'm going to ask the control room, do we have the soundbite from President Trump when asked a couple of days ago of whether or not the attack on Israel was imminent or when it might be coming? All right, we have that. Here it is.
How imminent is an Israeli strike on Iran?
Well, I don't want to say imminent, but it looks like it's something that could very well happen. Look, it's very simple, not complicated. Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. Other than that, I want them to be successful. I want them to be tremendous. We'll help them be successful. We'll trade with them. We'll do whatever is necessary. You know, I stopped a war between India and Pakistan. And I stopped it with trade. I don't think I've ever seen a story written about it, but it's pretty cool. They were getting ready. Pakistan was their turn to hit, and eventually they're going to go nuclear. And I stopped it. I called each. I respect each leader greatly. I know them. And I spoke to them, and I talked about trade. I said,
all right, so President Trump speaking there this morning. Senator, you'd almost have to believe the United States knew the Israelis had jets fueled. That was this morning. It was less than 12 hours later, the Israeli jets were in the air.
I would say I wasn't briefed on it.
Well, what?
I would say I wasn't briefed on it.
Right. I understand that you were not, but it's hard to imagine that the United States didn't know and have a good heads up. That's a real friend running interference and, if you want to say, deception.
I know that Israel did inform us that they were going to go. The timing on that, I don't know. I mean, I was with the president when he was having this press conference. Well, it wasn't really a press conference. It's kind of a Q&A. It turned into a press conference. And we've also, heard chatter and been involved in conversations that we knew this time was coming. But I do believe that the president was hoping to try to avoid anything like this if it was possible. Iranians had
You understand why I'm asking about the timing.
Absolutely. Here. But Iranians had the ticket to say, hey, we don't want this to happen. We want to work with you. And they chose not to. You have Israel and you have the United States both saying it's not going to happen. And there's nobody in that region, Leland, was okay with them having a nuclear weapon. There's no one in that region that wanted that to happen.
Yeah, no, and it's interesting, Joel, you pointed out, and we start very small and look at the military operation, we zoom way out. We haven't heard from the Jordanians, we haven't heard from the Saudis, we haven't heard from the Emiratis or the Qataris. Nope. It has been silence.
Crickets for a reason, because going to what the senator's pointing out and what we're talking about here, the region does not want Iran to have a nuclear weapon. Remember back during President Biden's term when he authorized shooting down of Iranian missiles, Jordan joined in that strike. The Saudis allowed it to go forward. I think that if Israel can contain its strikes to these military targets and these nuclear targets and maintain that and not have it expand more broadly, you're going to continue to see silence.
Hey, Leland, I wasn't briefed on this either, but I will answer the question because I don't have to be proper like that. Of course we knew. We have people there. All right, they saw what was going on. But look at how President Trump played this in conjunction with Israel. He inherited this problem. All right, he went ahead. Bibi came to town and he said, we want to blow them up before they reconstitute their air defenses. President Trump said, no, I'm going to do diplomacy. I'm going to do a good faith effort. If they stop enrichment and dismantle their stuff, we'll make a deal and everything will be fine. I'm going to do my best to do that. And he did. The Ayatollahs decided they wanted a bomb more than they wanted peace. And so at some point, it became too close to the end of that. And President Trump and President Netanyahu said, time is now.
And the reporting is that the Israelis shared the intelligence about the Iranians being able to build a bomb with the United States. I want to get Lieutenant General Newton in here as well. The Israelis have incredible air defenses. They have been planning for this for years, the layer of the aero defense system, David Sling, and then the Iron Dome to protect Israel from these kinds of attacks. They can't leave their airspace shut down for very long. We understand El Al has canceled planes. That's the only lifeline Israel has. They're shut off if El Al stops flying. Take us through militarily what Israel has to do the next 48, 72 hours to allow them to reopen their country about the size of New Jersey and not be shut down for 2 weeks of war.
Well, I've flown in and out of Israel. I certainly appreciate the position they're in. I guarantee you that Prime Minister Netanyahu is asking his Israeli military leadership the same thing. How long are we going to have to wait from 48 to 72, perhaps 96 hours? You get outside of 96 hours, though, Leland, and now it really has a broader impact on Israel, its economies, its people, the morale, and so forth. And let's not forget, someone's already said this tonight, Israel's been at war extensively, since October 7th. And so this is not only a military that's somewhat tired and so forth, but certainly it's a military that's and the Israeli people also. But I believe you're right. They've got to make sure they get back to as normal operations as they possibly can, not in the next couple hours, but certainly in the coming days.